Continue with this conversation, and I want us to switch gears and talk about the latest in the voter registration drive. We know the target is about 7.2 million, but IEBC has revised that to 6 million. But the performance of the very first week looks like it's not very interesting. It's 202,518 new voters netted. Let's take a look at some of the slides that will show us where the statistics are in terms of the voter registration. And first, again, that's the number I just mentioned there, against a weekly target of 1.5 million. Then the top 10 counties, this is how they are looking. Samburu County leads with 2,128. Elgeyo Marakwet follows with 3,889. You may wonder why it's leading with fewer. It's because of the percentage versus the target. Wajir, 3,489. West Pokot, 3,585. Mandera, 3,335. And of course, you can see the targets on the first column. Then top 10 counties continue. Nandi appears to have registered 6,319. Baringo, 4,325. Narok, 6,007. Turkana, 3,275. And Tana River, 1,981. Then the list, or the bottom 10 counties, you have Mombasa, Nairobi, Kirinyaga, Embu, Laikipia. But you see that Mombasa has recorded 4,486. Nairobi should actually be 16,000, not 6,151 against that target that you see there. Let's take a look at what else is going on. You have the other bottom 10 counties are Murang'a, Kitui, Nyandarua, and Nyeri, and the numbers are 3,359 for Murang'a, 2,324 for Kitui, 1,495 for Nyandarua, 1,915 for Nyeri, and Kiambu, against a target of 385,000, has only recorded 2,334. We shortly be listening to voices of Kenyans as they comment about the voter registration shortly. But Honorable Priscilla, when you're reflecting on these numbers, especially if you have to look at the regional spread, some like Kiambu County recording the lowest number of new voters against one of the highest targets in this country, and counties like Samburu recording quite a good percentage, not necessarily in absolute numbers. What's going on?
I think 2 or 3 things. One is a last-minute community. Mount Kenya is a last-minute community, so it doesn't surprise me of my own region, my own county of Nyeri. We even have a saying in Kikuyu, to run when the sun has gone down. We don't run in the morning. When the sun is coming down, we run. So I think that towards the, as the weeks go, this is only week 1, we're going to see that improve. But also 2 is the presidential candidates' influence of the voter registration. I think that people feel a lot more connected to an electoral process when they have a presidential candidate. And the fact that Mount Kenya doesn't actually seem to have clarity on that point is not helping our voters and because Kenya has voluntary registration of voters, voluntary. It is the identity card that is compulsory, but the voter's card is voluntary. So you have to voluntarily walk to the IEBC polling center and get registered. And because it is voluntary, then there needs usually to be a stimulus or to be an inspiration or to be a motivation as to why you should take the voter's card. When people have a presidential candidate, which is what I'm hoping, for example, regions with presidential candidates, and that's why for me Rift Valley doesn't surprise. It has the presidential candidate who's been on the ground for the longest. That you can clearly see. I hope that as we continue to prepare for the other presidential candidate to hit the ground, you're going to see the numbers start to improve.
You're saying the other candidate?
Yeah.
They're candidates.
Anakuja. Again, in Mount Kenya, you don't kimbiza maneno. Wacha maneno itoke na wenyewe. We utoki na maneno mwenyewe, maneno inatoka na wenyewe. Kwa hivyo maneno itoke na ruza. So as the numbers, as presidential candidates come up, you will see the effect on the ground.
Okay.
If Mount Kenya gets a uniting candidate, remember we're in conversations on Mount Kenya unity. If we get a candidate in between and conversations look like they are yielding, then you will see the numbers go up. But also for the political leaders, it means that they have work, which is my third point, that all of our political leaders have work to do. You have to go and convince people to register. I mean, Jesus went back home to be registered. It is nothing new. It was done in Rome. It's been done in Jerusalem. It should be done here in Kenya as well.
Okay. All right. And I want us to listen to some of the persons targeted for this registration are saying, including perspectives from other persons in the country in regards to the low numbers and how the exercise is going.
Kitambo sasa ndo maana wamekuja wakiwa wadogo, lakini mtu kama sahi venye MP wetu anakuja anatuambia kama 2 weeks later ago, sasa ndo tunakuja ndo tuna register.
Wengi wa area yetu ninawajua, tukishikana na chief wetu, kwa chief ananiambia fulani na fulani walichukua ID. So tunajaribu kuwapigia simu.
Sensitization campaigns have not been as robust as it was actually presaged. And number two, personally I feel that I've lost faith in the government, in the IEBC, because at the end of the day I don't feel my vote will count.
Bosi pia waendelea kusungusha hiyo nini kutangazia watu ili waweze kujua ni siku gani wanahitaji kushika hiyo kura.
Tunajitokeza saa 10 ya usiku kwenda kupiga kura, lakini matokeo vile huwa unakuja tunaona watu wanafurutana. Hiyo ni maana kwamba watu kulingana kura vile huwa tunapiga si vile matokeo huwa inatokea.
Wengine wamemaliza shule ati mheshimiwa mimi sijachukua kura, ni kwa sababu kwa nini? Ati sijapewa chochote. It's funny. Hiyo kitu imepitiwa na wakati.
So, Honorable Rosa, I mean, the Member of Parliament there is talking about the challenges that he's facing. People do not want to come forward and register as voters. Others are saying we have lost confidence in government and the IEBC. What are the challenges in your county that would be causing the uptake of this voter registration drive to be so low?
Yeah, first of all, I think by and large, the larger portion of that target, IEBC target, was targeting the young people, actually. And the young people, many of them do not have IDs. You know, like Mheshimiwa Nyokabi says, we are last minute, Kenyans are last minute pushers. And even if you've done your Form 4, you sort of don't feel like you need an ID until now elections come and people are pepping you up to go and get an identity card. Yet we know that identity cards are used for various reasons and not just for elections. So what I've experienced is a lot of these young people do not have IDs, and now is when with the campaign and the drive for them to get to register as voters, now is when they are registering for national identity cards. And if they're out in 2 weeks, we know that the 3rd and the 4th week of registration will be much better than it is now. But it is also true that there is apathy.
Right.
There is apathy on the ground. I think apathy also coming up from the fact that people are dealing with so many issues. People are dealing with survival issues. So when you go out and tell people or ask people to come out and register, this is the last thing on their mind. They'd rather go on with their other jobs, which is about survival, how they're going to eat tonight, as opposed to going to try and queue or going to try to get registered as a voter. So there is apathy on the ground, and I think that's not just for us in Nyanza, but all over the country. There seems to be that apathy, again coming from the lowered economic purchasing power. People are struggling to make ends meet, and they think they're relegating this voter registration right to the back, as if it's not so important. But I'd also like to say that what IEBC is doing now is so different from what the IEBC did in the run-up to elections of 2013,
right,
when there was such intense campaign, whether it was on television, on newspapers, on FM stations, and that is when we realized a really high number of new registered voters. But now IEBC is quiet, and I'm sure they'll say that it's because of finances or budgets or funding, but we don't, that hype that was created by IEBC in the run-up of 2013 is missing now. And
but Honorable Rosa, that time it was a fresh register for everyone, and that's why everyone had to be mobilized.
Yes,
and eventually they got 14 million.
But from what? 14 million from what?
No, I'm saying in 2013 it was a fresh register altogether. Everyone had to register fresh.
Yes.
So that was 14 million. Come 2017, There was the first mass voter registration, which was in 2016, I believe, and then the second mass voter registration in January of 2017. And in totality, they got about 5 million, getting to 19.6 million voters from 14. And now they're targeting another 7.2. So must we have a second voter registration drive come next year, or should this suffice if really we are to be prudent in management of our resources?
No, what I'm saying is when IEBC creates the hype, okay, and there's advertising and it sort of builds confidence in the people, and more than if it comes from politicians who most of the time are partisan. But when IEBC, we saw that hype in terms of advertising, in terms of voter education coming from IEBC and a lot of money being put behind it, we automatically saw numbers going up. Whether it was everybody was registering as new voters or not, but we saw IEBC at least realizing a huge percentage of their proposal, which is not what is happening now. IEBC is quiet, everything is quite quiet, and people are just not getting that impetus, like they have to go and register.
Right.
But I'm sure that within the second or within the third and fourth week, with the IDs coming in and politicians going back to the ground and creating voter education and creating that those scenarios where they are talking to people and making them realize why they really need to register as voters, I'm sure that the numbers will improve.
And Haman, there was this belief in 2013 that the election was won at the registration. I don't know how that fared in 2017, but we'll shortly be looking at the numbers. But what do you think is the role of this voter registration drive, and this apathetic response by especially the young voters or the first-time voters? What is the solution out of it?
Yeah, I think Priscilla is right that we are people who rush the last moments. But if you look at the time, 1 week, 3 to go, the targets, what we have achieved, we are unlikely to achieve even half, even 50%, unless it's an extension. Or unless, like Rosa says, we have another, I think it's you say we have another round of mass voter registration. But again, as Rosa says, Mheshimiwa, that IDs, it may not be quite true. Go to any commissioner's office, there are heaps and heaps of IDs, uncollected, and they've been lying there. Anywhere, go to any part of the country, there are heaps like this, you know, boxes. They are put in some small boxes, like those ones which hold the business cards. So really there must be something bigger than that. And I think there are two issues. One is the issue of apathy brought about by how we have conducted our elections in the past. And I said this many times in the past. When we do not have free and fair elections. So, and somebody has said there, one of your viewers, people get so disillusioned. To get them to be interested next time is very difficult. And that's where we are. We are now reaping from what we did last time, making our elections clearly not free and fair. The second thing is we are dealing with a fresh type of voter, the young boy or girl of 18, 19, and the approach must be different. I don't think hype enough will be enough. I mean, hype alone will be enough. Those vibes could have worked in 2013. I don't think they work now. So there's a need to bring our young voter on board. So I really feel bad when people vilify Raila Odinga for trying to inject a sense of history whenever he's addressing issues. People say, we don't care that somebody was detained. We don't care that Kibaki had a problem with, we don't care there was 2007. Then we say, now, where are we heading as a country? The young boys and girls in this country must know we face certain problems because of our history. It's good we know that history so that we understand where we are, the challenges we face, and how we can sort out those challenges for a better tomorrow. So yes, we are dealing with a new crop of voters, and the approach surely cannot be the same for 2007, 2013. So IEBC, and like Mheshimiwa Rosa says, IEBC will always talk about money. And yet they are the most extravagant body this country has ever had. Only next to Parliament.
What do you mean extravagant?
Yeah?
What do you mean extravagant? Everything they do.
I've seen you rolling figures here on your boards here, showing that ours is the most expensive election. What is so special about us? Or you want to be like SGR? When Kenyans are asked, government is asked, how can your rail be 10 times what it costs? Name it somewhere else, Morocco, Ethiopia, Tanzania, 3 times more. They say, you know, ours is passing tunnel to give room for animals. My friend, why? How can your election be that expensive? There must be something wrong. And Raila said, when we were looking at the referendum, and IEBC was talking 14 billion. Raila said 2 billion is enough. It might have been a bit too low, but he had a point. Our elections are just...
Haman, the question I'm asking is because, of course, it's pretty expensive here to compare even from the region. Yes. But IEBC defends itself and says our election is activity-based. We have to ensure that we have proper measures that secure the election, whether it's from the election technology or it's the safety features that have to be put to the ballot papers. Are there things that you've picked and thought these are actually things we can do without and make our election cheaper but still credible?
If you go to your wallet, if I know you have a wallet, there must be a Visa card, whether it's credit card or ATM. I'm sure you have, all of us here have. How can you trust your million in the bank on a card and you can't trust your vote to be electronic? You know, we're just joking. You can trust your money and conduct your transactions electronically with an ATM, and you are telling me you cannot trust that you can vote electronically. We are just jokers, honestly. Look here, something else.
Yes.
We are full-time staff of IEBC, right? If they were really serious, by now they would have brought on board more than 3 million voters, so that this should just be a mop-up. Secondly, you'll go to other countries, they are volunteers. We rush to employ boys to pay them. Other countries, more richer than us, use volunteers. And there'll be many, many university students willing to volunteer because that forms part of their experience, goes on their CV. So we're just lazy, I'm telling you, and con men.
Okay. Of course, the voter
using every opportunity to make some little money.
Voter registration should be continuous. Honorable Priscilla, I'll give you an opportunity, but first let's take a look at the projected numbers and how they would pan out in 2022. Do you have that? And if all persons that are targeted to be registered were to be enlisted, then Western region would raise its stakes to 2.65 million registered voters. The Coast region would have 2.36 million. Northeastern, 687. Upper Eastern, that is the counties of Meru, Tharaka-Nithi, Embu, Isiolo, and Marsabit, would be 1.98 million. Lower Eastern, the counties of Machakos, Kitui, and Makueni would be, well, we missed that figure. It should be about 2 million new voters. For Rift Valley, it would be 6.4 million. This is a region that has 14 counties, stretching all the way from Turkana all the way through the North Rift region. Central Kenya, this is the counties of Kirinyaga, Nyeri, Murang'a, Kiambu, which one am I missing? And Nyandarua would be 4 million because of the targeted 1 million new voters. Nyanza region would raise its stakes by over 998,000 to reach 3.7 million. These are the counties of Kisumu, Siaya, Homa Bay, Migori, Nyamira, and Kisii. And Nairobi County would enlist up to 3.08 million after getting an additional over 800,000 new voters. And Honorable Priscilla, as you reflect on that, what role will this, if they're truly registered, what will they play, knowing that at this time the structure of our population, the adult population, about 52% is between 18 and 35. This 7.2 million, majority of them would be first-time voters, and obviously just around between 18 and early 20s.
It is true now the conversation has to turn to the youth. There is no other way for the next election. History is going to be important, and I think that Haman says it correctly. And people who don't know where they are coming from cannot know where they are going. You have to know where you're coming from to set your rudder right. In any case, the rear view mirror is supposed to help you to see what's happening at the back so that you don't go back or you don't hit something at the back. So there's a sense in which that history is important, but the sense in which the larger conversation is on young people. And part of the apathy, which is what I wanted to raise earlier, is the agenda. The young people must feel connected to this election. They must feel that their questions will be addressed. They must feel that the country is listening to them, and they must feel that the presidential candidates have the answers. We saw a very good example of Bernie Sanders in the United States elections and the connection with young people. In fact, the largest number of young people supported Bernie Sanders as opposed to Hillary Clinton. And that was because Bernie understood the young people. He wasn't young himself, but he understood the young people's anxieties. The anxieties around jobs, the anxieties around unemployment, the anxieties around education, the anxieties around peace and security, the anxieties around new and young families and all that takes, reproductive health issues for us women. So if those issues are on the table in this election, if the youth agenda is on the table in this election, and you can show that the AGPO, that is not working very well, if you elect this leader, AGPO issues will be addressed. If you elect this leader, we will have a stimulus package around the COVID-19 recovery. So the question now is that youth agenda, connecting it very quickly to young people and making them see that those votes matter. Then that way we're going to see higher numbers of registration in regions, for example, in Central, but also other regions in the country. So it's much more about the youth agenda to cure the apathy that we are starting to feel. And in a quick turn, and I'm also hoping, because even when we were in the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, the mass voter registration is in 2 seasons. So this is season 1, and then they're going to have another season, I think up maybe December or something like that.
Is it prudent? Because
they said they wouldn't have a second one because of funding.
Because they don't have resources.
Now that is where legislators come in. You push the funding because it's a funding question. Because what happens actually is, this is October. Sometimes people are still a bit beholden to their normal day-to-day activities. And so it might take some time. I'm also hoping that in 3 weeks, a bit of the political leadership turns around these numbers and turns around the agenda and puts the young people in the center of the agenda that we're discussing about. But if that doesn't happen, then it's up to Parliament to find resources within the supplementary budget, which comes in December, for the IEBC to do a second and final mass voter registration. But I'm also
that's the question I'm asking just before you go on. That's the question I'm asking. Is there prudence of resources usage, knowing that for a whole week, some of these clerks have just been sitting idle, no one is coming to register, and then you want to do that again in another season?
Yes, what actually happened with our constitution, remember we put in their continuous voter registration. We are supposed to be doing this, those clerks are supposed to be registering as people turn 18. Unfortunately, that is not happening. It is a trickle. Only a trickle comes in. So because of that trickle problem, you now put a time like October for the mass voter registration of what you would have been doing since January. So there is that prudent use. We had already seen this as a country in Constitution of Kenya 2010. So our way of curing it was that continuous trickle registration, but then a bit of more focused with intense public campaign. And this is how we've done things in Kenya. This is how we do census. This is how we do polio. This is how we do Form 1 intake. So we are people of intensity. You have to intensify an activity for us to do it. So now this intensity is in October. You can do this intensity again in February or it's around about that time. So I'm personally really hoping that will happen. But just ending on the point of Manyora is value for money. Those are things now IEBC can look through, because there can be a way of getting value for money. The clerk can move around. The clerk doesn't have to be stationary. Can be a mobile clerk, These days with electronic, there is no reason for a clerk to sit here the whole day na anasikia pale chini kuna mazishi, anasikia pale kwa ile nyumba kuna kuna harusi anasikia pale leo ni siku ya soko. Kwanza sisi ni watu wa soko kama kwetu Nyeri. Leo siku ya soko ni Thursday. Badala uende ukaregister watu pale nje ya soko, unakaa una register zero. Now that also they have to be a bit more creative and value for money. We really must see value for money with the processes that we have.
But Priscilla, give it to them. I think what you're saying is true, but what IEBC is doing is they are very flexible. For example, if on market days and if there are funerals, they are very flexible, and with arrangements, they're actually allowing their kids to be moved to those places, which is a good thing.
But so now, how do we move forward? I asked that question about the impact of the young voters. Again, the structure of the population is that 52%, or about 14, just slightly over 14 million of the adult population, actually between 18 and 35. If you are to stretch it to anyone who is below 40, then you're talking about 63% of the population. Is the political class speaking to these people?
And that's actually takes you back to what that individual was saying there. About, not the individual, the member of parliament, where a young person was telling him, no, I've not registered, I've not been given anything. And what that actually shows is just what Honorable Nyokabi is talking about, that there's a disconnect. To them, most of the young people, they feel that taking a vote, being registered as a voter is not doing a favor for themselves. It is doing somebody else a favor. And that is where we have to come up with civic education so that they know that your vote is your voice and it's your right, and that is when you can make a meaningful decision for yourself, you know, an outcome that will favor you.
Right.
But right now, majority of these young people actually feel that even when politicians are talking to them about go and get registered, they think that they're doing that politician a favor, and if I'm doing you a favor, Hebu finish with me just now, you know, just sort me out just now. So that really brings us to that fact which Honorable Priscilla is talking about, that there's a disconnect, and it's up to the politicians and other stakeholders to let these young people know that your vote is your right and you're doing it for yourself. You're making choices for yourself, for your future, and not for the politician that you're taking in. And I wonder, it also makes me feel that these young people feel that when we politicians get elected, or that when they vote for us, we better our lives and do not care about them. You know, so that they begin to disconnect with, why am I voting? I'm voting for you to go to parliament so that you have fun and you get rich, when I see no effect or no positive impact in my life. You know, that could also be a cry from the young people.
Right.
Them not seeing any change or any positive impact that a politician makes to their lives. So that could be a protest, so to speak.
Okay, indeed. And I want us to transition to talk about what the political leaders have been doing. The past few days, you've seen some of them going to the Mount Kenya region, that is Raila Odinga as well as William Ruto, having different meetings and promising, like Raila Odinga is saying that starting next year, there'll be 6 million shillings for every family that is unemployed. On the side of William Ruto, he's talking about the bottom-up approach to ensure that the small and medium enterprises are given facilities to ensure that they improve their hustle, quote unquote. We've heard from leaders from the One Kenya Alliance talk about the economy, how they're going to fix it and fight corruption. Let me begin with you, Herman Manyora, before you can listen to the clips from these leaders. What is this messaging? Is it connecting with the voter and the challenges that currently they face? Because I think it was you who spoke about poverty, and parents are not able to even meet the cost of education at such a time.
I think messaging is a little wanting. But before that, you asked a question of the impact, what we can read from this ongoing voter registration. I think you can begin to see that there's going to be low voter registration and ultimately low voter turnout around the mountain. So if there's a politician who needed the mountain vote as a matter of life and death, then they can begin to smell the coffee. Things are not going to work for them. Other things may change, there will be other dynamics, but this particular one, that's very little interest in the registration around the mountain, and certainly low voter turnout is going to affect some of these people. Now, in terms of the messaging, it is William Ruto who has captured the imagination of the nation in terms of messaging. Never mind that what he's saying is really hollow and it can't quite stand any scrutiny. But it resonates with the people. You know, when people are poor and they are hungry, they are cold, they can't take their children to school, their businesses have collapsed, and somebody comes up with a message, people listen to that message. It happened in America. Trump, you get it? The things Trump was saying were resonating with the American people who are now fed up with the establishment. You get it? For Raila, he must step up his messaging. It hasn't quite sunk or resonated with the people. You know, Raila is lucky because he has a magnet. That magnet works for him. You saw when he was moving around the mountain, people had thought he would hardly In fact, some people thought there will be hostile crowds if Raila went to the mountain. And they kept saying, why can't you go there? Ask Uhuru to take you there. At best, they thought, even if he was not harassed, because Kenya is now in the 21st century, we welcome everybody, every part of the country, he wouldn't get even 10 people. So when you saw those crowds, and they are organic crowds, nobody has transported them. I saw people walking the way we used to walk to go for rallies, you know, that kind of thing. It's magic this guy has. But in terms of messaging, I'm yet to see it.
Okay. Will you say that, just hold on, I know you're itching to respond, but you say that the messaging by the Deputy President is hollow. What exactly do you...
I'm not saying the messaging is hollow.
No, whatever he's saying is hollow. What do you mean with that?
Proper. It is working. That's why it's captured the imagination of the country.
It's working, but it's hollow.
Yeah.
What do you mean
he's
with
putting
that?
on the table are hollow. You get it?
What exactly?
There are no grounding. There was one in this studio who was asked to explain what bottom up. What did they explain? You are the one who asked. Did they explain to you?
Bottom down.
You know, this is airtime. We don't want to waste
bottom down.
It is not easy. You see? What is trickle down? You see, for example, this is a capitalist country. The money is created through production. And they are owners of industry, owners of means of production. It is these people who create the wealth. You see, and the government taxes people to get part of that wealth. And then things can go down. And things have been going down all along, and they have not been working. So you need fresh thinking. How come with all the devolved funds, Kenya is not moving forward? How come with all the donor funding to women groups from the 1970s, nothing ever worked? Those animals that were given, all of them used to die, the chicken, what? Our cooperative movement, well, I think the best in Africa, if not in the world. But it never worked. Our coffee has never picked up. So what I'm saying is, before you cut me short, is it is hollow. There is no substance in it. You get what I'm saying? However, the messaging is apt. It's well put, and the people are dancing to it.
This country, of course, the diagnosis by very many people, including the political class, is right. But the solution appears to be the challenge. Let's listen to what the One Kenya Alliance leaders are saying about 2022 and the journey.
Naona hali ya ufisadi kama ambayo limeshuhudiwa between 2013 and 2017. Watu hata wanaharibu maparesteto, na kila mtu alikuwa analetewa mapesa mamilioni na wale ambao wamegawa serikali 50-50.
Hata kama mnapenda Kalonzo namna gani, kama huna kadi ya kura, wewe huna maana kwa Kalonzo.
Sisi tunataka uongozi ambao unaweza kufanya nini? Kuaminika, sivyo? Sisi hapa tuko imara na oka, na tunasema sisi tutakuhakikishia ya kwamba hiyo safari ya State House iwakizi Kalonzo Musyoka, tunakuhakikishia tuko na wewe na watu wa Kaiti wako imara. Watu wa Mukuyuni na wa Kaiti, tafadhalini angalieni hawa OKA. Na hapo tunasema OKA all the way to State House.
So I've picked two things there. The leaders are saying ufisadi and register for the vote. Deputy President's side, this is what they're saying.
Of petroleum have questions to answer, and the corruption cartel in the Ministry of Energy must be broken for the prices of fuel products to come down. It is not even about the taxes. It is about the corruption in the Ministry of Petroleum that is aiding a few companies to make super profits, while the ordinary citizen in Kenya is suffering high prices.
Before you make KPLC a state project, you must disclose to Kenyans who are the private equity holders, the largest private equity holders in KPLC. Tell us who are the owners of all those independent power producers that have been extorting money from KPLC and from Kenyans. Mukifika hapo, sasa mtatuambia you are dealing with a problem.
Your Excellency, wewe unazungumza kuhusu bottom up na unakasirisha watu wengi. Wacha nikuambie serious siku ya leo. Watu wanakasirika sana sana ni mabroker. Sababu brokers don't believe in work. That is why you can hear them criticizing the wheelbarrow. Najua wheelbarrow ni ishara ya kazi.
Na tumeshasikia maneno ya bottom up. kuuda uchumi kuanzia chini kupeleka juu. Pesa iingie mashinani, vijana wapate ajira, mama mboga kazi yake ipate fedha, vijana wa bodaboda waache kuwa criminalized.
We want to believe that you will be a record breaker as the 5th president of the Republic of Kenya. You will set an agenda that will never be broken by anybody in terms of improving the economy. The elections of 2022 is about the economy, the economy, the economy.
All right. Of course, Wilson Sossion there, nominated Member of Parliament through the ODM, now shifting allegiance to the UDA side. And Honorable Priscilla, we saw you somewhere saying that Raila Odinga is, quote-unquote, our Biden. And we've listened to the messaging. He was in Mount Kenya over the weekend, and he said that every family that is unemployed will get 6,000 shillings every month. When you listen to all these things, how practical are they if the DP side is saying Mama Mboga, the boda rider, all of them will be supported economically, and Raila Odinga is saying we'll have 6,000 shillings per month for every unemployed family? How do you make this happen at a time that the country is struggling with all these challenges of revenue collection and public debt?
I think it is possible in terms of some of these economic measures to make them happen. And I say that as somebody who served in budget committee, because it is a matter of priorities. So what you put a priority on is what you're going to find funding for. And the reason why I was calling Raila Amolo Odinga our Joe Biden is because some of the Biden strategies around the COVID-19 recovery, including now what he has recently proposed around the money. It's a stimulus package around COVID that Biden has done and removed a lot of people from poverty during the COVID season. So it is possible to do that, to have a household-based economic strengthening. I think that's what they called HES. We're still going to find the right policy words around it, but it is possible to structure something for households under extreme poverty, or what we call hardcore poverty, urban poverty, economic stimulus sort of arrangement, and stimulate families and households to continue to play a role in the economy. But the one that you didn't mention, which I love the most myself, is Mandela. Mandela was a transition president, and very much, sort of cutting a link between the old South Africa and the new South Africa. And that was what we call the Mandela moment. You cut a link between the old Kenya and the new Kenya. And one thing that we have seen is working is devolution. Devolution has worked marvelous in South Africa. They have regional governments, but they also have the sort of, and you've seen the growth in South Africa, the Western Cape, the Eastern Cape, Johannesburg. I mean, South Africa has grown in wholesome. And that's the essence of devolution here, which we have seen working. So the reason I personally would want to support a leader who's going to put more investment in devolution is because we've seen the early signs of devolution working for our country. Of course, corruption is a problem, and we must fight corruption. It's even interesting to see the conversation in the Deputy President's corner when the Minister for Energy is actually drawn from their corner. So if there's anybody to do any explaining, it is that minister who is from their side, not from this side. But corruption must be fought. Whatever is said, I know. Corruption must, politics is side A and side B. That is how it must be. There's the ruling side and the opposition side. So now he is from the ruling side.
Just hold on. When a Kenyan is looking at the government of Kenya, they're looking at the government of Kenya. Cabinet decisions, ministers of the government of Kenya.
That's the point.
So when you come and say that he's blaming the energy ministry or the petroleum ministry, and you're saying that the energy ministry is on his side.
No, the deputy president is the deputy president of the Republic of Kenya. That is given. The deputy president is part of this government. The deputy president and the president had a 50-50 government in which they brought ministers. The deputy president brought some ministers to this government. So if there are any questions to be answered by this government on matters of energy, the deputy president cannot remove himself from those answers because he is part of that problem. But what is more important is that corruption must be fought, whether in the Ministry of Energy or in devolution. But our future and our promise for the answers that we need in terms of the economic issues that the youth are raising, like in my own county of Nyeri, if you give us the resources we need up to 9 billion Kenya shillings, things. Our governor can do agro-processing. It is that agro-processing that will give us jobs. For as long as our governor has 5 billion, this is just barely enough for the salaries and recurrent expenditure. And so without devolution and increasing resources in devolution, we are not able to do the things and the aspirations, including now for the hustlers and the bottoms down. You can never address the bottoms down until you have the resources.
Sam, can I say something about messaging?
Yes, but just before you do, there's a point I don't want to lose. I just want to put it on your in your notes rather. When you're telling us that increased resources for devolution, yet we know in this country that, for instance, the current year we're spending about 1 trillion shillings to pay our public debt, and our revenues are just about 2 trillion shillings. But yes, your response on the messaging and how practical it is from the side of Raila Odinga and Deputy President William Ruto and others.
I want to say that the Deputy President has been on his messaging for almost 2 years. Okay? When Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga has just begun talking about his messaging. And I want to say that usually when you have a very poor, restless citizen, that populist messaging is what is going to catch people's attention. And I'm talking about populist messaging, which is the Deputy President's messaging, where he says, all you poor people, you people who are downtrodden and not being thought of, I'm bringing you to the table. You are all going to join government. You'll all be ministers. I mean, that is what it sounds like to the people. It's a message that's deceiving to those people, making them believe that as soon as Deputy President becomes the president, they'll stop being poor, they will now be the ones deciding, making decisions in this country, they'll be the ones running the ministries, and they'll be the ones whose pockets will be full of money. That is why that messaging is really resonating with them, because it's deceiving them. Whereas Mheshimiwa Raila, what is taken up to is not to come up with a populist message, but a solution-based message. Okay? So how are we going to improve your lives? We are going to improve your lives by at least looking at the really downtrodden families which are not able to fend for themselves. And in each household, we will give 6,000 shillings. You know, he's trying to look for solutions, which might not be as catchy as, oh, you poor people, you will throw this and become, you know. So it's almost like making people feel that now we are going to take over, which is not the case. You must explain to them, how are they then going to take over from being at the bottom to now being at the top? So it's deceptive, and it will cause a problem, because when those people realize that it is not happening and it is actually not possible, then there'll be a revolt, there'll be a problem. So this is why that messaging of the Deputy President, which has been going on for 2 years, has really resonated well with the people, because everybody wants to better their lives. Everybody wants to move from point A to point C, you know, from being down there to being up here. And if you're telling me that without even you, it's almost like when you go to church and some, I'm sorry to use this example, but some pastors will tell you, do this, throw this, your clothes, do this. If I put this water on you, then nothing will happen to you. You can do anything you want. People, just because you're in that state, you're vulnerable, you believe it. But when they realize it has not happened, they get disillusioned. So I think the Deputy President's messaging is populist and it's deceptive, but it's resonating well with the people, because people are looking for any hopeful thing to clutch on. But Mheshimiwa Raila has just started his messaging, which will need a lot more explanation. Okay. And it will take time to get into the people's...
And that is the explanation I'm looking for. I don't have the specific figure, if anyone can share, the unemployed Kenyans or households in this country. But if you to take an example of 1 million households or 1 million people unemployed in this country, so you give them 6,000 shillings every month, that gives you 6 billion shillings per month. So in a year, that will be 72 billion shillings. How are we going to afford this at a time that is the clamor to increase the resources that are being sent to counties? In the same year, you have 1 trillion shillings to pay public debt, and you have revenues to the tune of just about 2 trillion shillings that are being collected every year.
Definitely the economists will have to sit down and find out how that's going to happen. But remember, right now, we have...
But is the political class saying this?
Just hold on. Remember, and I'm sure they're working with the economists. Remember, right now, we have the 2,000, is it 2,400 or 3,000 or 2,500 going to the...
2,000 per month.
The aged, right. The over 70 years. How much is it? So in fact, if you're 70 and I'm 70 and we belong to one family, you are getting, say, 5,000 between us. 2,000, is it 2,500?
It's 2,000 per month.
2,000 per month. That's already 4,000 coming to this one family because you're over 70 and I'm over 70, for example. But in this case now, what Honorable Raila is saying is every household will get like 6,000. So there's already a starting point. If between the two of us, or the wife and the husband is already getting 4,000 within their family because of their age, in that family you'll only need to add like 2,000. I think there's a starting point, and once they work it out, it can happen. But the whole point is, what Raila is trying to say is, we are focusing on the vulnerable families, and we are going to do something about it. What are you going to do about it? We are going to offer stipends to those families that are not able to meet their economic demands. And what are we going to do? We are going to give them 6,000. And we have a starting point, and that just has to be worked on and to be well aligned. I think it is possible.
All right. And Haman, what do you think of this at a time with all these promises for the cash handouts to the vulnerable, to the unemployed and everything? This is a burden because the government does not have money of its own. This is a burden to the employed or the people in business. What sort of an impact would this have if you to reflect on the promises of the regimes that have been and the impact it has on the citizens in terms of how much they have to cough and give?
Let's begin by saying, Sam, it shouldn't even be 6,000. It should be something reasonable. Perhaps 20,000. Let's add that this country can afford it. Let's also add that it's done elsewhere, across the world. Okay? You have heard of the dole, eh? Really, developed countries cannot allow their poor to die during winter because they cannot afford to heat their homes. Yeah? That is subsidized or given free. And the unemployed in many other countries are also given some kind of stipend, you know, cash transfers. So it's not new, it's not Kenyan, and it can be done. Now, those who are saying, like you are saying, $1 trillion for our debts, counties barely receiving their dues and so on, are forgetting that who tells you we must collect 1.8 trillion? When Kibaki took over, this country was collecting only 200 billion. Are you getting it? They were able to push this to $1 trillion in the first 5 years. Who tells you we can't collect 4 trillion? Who tells you? So the income, people are basing on some static income.
You know, Haman, that's a very good question. Yes. And I'll refer you to what just happened a few weeks ago. Yes. The courts nullified the imposition of a minimum tax.
But listen.
By, just hold on, by KRA. Yeah. And the Commissioner General thereafter said that we'll have to lose or to miss out on 23 billion shillings in revenue.
Yes.
So they have to look for alternatives.
Yes.
So you're talking about who said that we have to collect 1.8. Sustaining that level is already a challenge.
That thinking is what I'm calling lazy thinking. How did the Kibaki move collection from 200 or so billion to $1 trillion in 4 or 5 years? What I'm saying, who says to get more revenue, you'll have to tax Kenyans more? Who said? We must be innovative. We must look for creative ways. In fact, taxes must be lowered. You cannot develop this country with the current taxation regime. It must be lowered. But who tells you everybody is paying taxes? Do these people who own houses in Nairobi pay taxes for them, the flats? They have refused that we mark those flats. If you marked these flats or these houses, all of them commercial, and give each of them a number and enter in the tax register somewhere, how much money are you going to raise? How much can we get from licenses and fees? You know, we give many of our things for free, mining and what have you. What I'm saying is we need to be innovative, and the government can rate between 3 to 4 trillion every year. Number two, you say we cannot afford your 70 or so billion per year.
I didn't say we can't.
Some would say, yeah. Some people are saying we can't afford. But the same people are forgetting we steal almost 700 billion every year by our own admission, not even the World Bank. Uhuru began telling us when he was in charge of finance. And he has told us just only recently we lose 2 billion a day. Look at losing 2 billion every day vis-a-vis your 6 billion every month. You see what I'm talking about? So there is, all you need, and what I wanted to say is, before I forget the point, is that you can now see sloganeering vis-a-vis programs. Raila is coming up with a well-thought-out program of sorting out a problem. The other person is sloganeering
but he's endearing himself to the people because he's saying populist things. You get what I'm saying? But Raila now, and if you have been listening to him in the past, he's coming up with really solutions, well thought out solutions, talking to experts who give him expert opinion like this, 6,000. It can be done, and it will be done if he becomes president. But back to what you said, you see, it has been said, you campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose. Ladies here may not like it. What you tell a girl when you are courting her, it's not what you find when you marry her.
Imagine.
So Raila must know he's now courting a girl. You have to tell the girl sweet things. Then later when you marry, you say, Mami, you know, let's see, you happen to panga kidogo. Like for now, so that's what I'm saying, the messaging of Raila. He's dealing with really issues. It is also helping him because he's coming out like a statesman, very presidential, a person who people can trust to drive the country ahead. But that may not be enough. He will also now have to know that he's running against a person who is going for the heart of the voter.
Okay.
If you leave the man to go for the heart of the voter, with your good ideas, you may have no opportunity to go to State House to implement those good ideas. That's what I meant. Raila has to work on his messaging so that these good ideas he has, he can implement them. Because you can't implement them from Bondo. You must be in State House.
Okay. That's interesting. You should say that. But yes, Commissioner, I'm getting to you. There's that question I asked you about affording all these promises and ambitions to even spread our resources to cover devolution further. But also just struggling with the question of taxation, more taxation, or to expand our bracket versus spurring growth and productivity. What works faster?
Well, I think a lot of these things have to be put, and you know, we're going to run this. The next election is running on an economic agenda, so we're going to hear a lot of the economic policies and the economic options around how to raise more money. But what is clear, even for all of us and so many of us in these circles, is that the tax base is very narrow. Only far too few Kenyans are paying the tax that we require to run the country. So that tax base must be widened. So there must be some creativity in widening that tax base. But then also the corruption. Again, our bucket is mashimu ndio zimejaa. Maji inaingia lakini there is so much water leaking. So we must stop the leakages as well. And then of the little money that you have, remember we already have safety nets in our economic system. We already have the cash transfer for the elderly. We have the cash transfer for the severe disability. We have the presidential bursary for the orphans and vulnerable children. We have the affirmative action funds, including GAF, including WEZO, including Youth Enterprise, Women Enterprise Fund. So I think also what the Prime Minister is saying, what we haven't had is a safety net for young people who are suffering economic hardship.
Right.
You know, because we've had other types of safety nets. Can we also now introduce a safety net for young people? But that is not to detract from wealth creation and job creation. You spend a lot more time on your wealth and job creation, but you admit that there are those who will need a safety net, like the cold during winter. Then you say, this is now the safety net that we're going to have. So that you need to see the 6,000 shillings as part of a wider scheme. The first obligation, which is where I personally belong. Remember, us guys are from Nyeri, we are from the Kibaki School of Economics and the Kibaki School of Doing Things. Improve the economy, young people will get jobs. Improve the economy, reduce the rate of borrowing. By the time the Kibaki administration was leaving, we were at 11%. Bring back such measures, and you will see young people getting jobs. So that you have a very small number that you then need to safety net on. But I don't want this show to end before I also say something else on an
important safety net. I actually want to give that opportunity before we look at the feedback. I understand that there's something being unveiled. Is it more about Polycare?
Sure.
What is this about?
The Polycare is a one-stop gender-based violence center. And the police, in fact, Polycare is police care. So the police in their caring utumishi kwa wote approach now want to set up a one-stop gender-based violence recovery center where you do your medical and you do your legal so that we try and make the society safer for our young women, for our young girls. But you know, these days even young boys are suffering sexual offenses, sodomy and other bad things that the society is doing. So that the Polycare Center now, when you go there, it gives dignity both to the perpetrator, because a lot of DNA and all of those other specimens have to be taken, and it gives dignity also to the victim. So it's priceless dignity. We launch it tomorrow at the Kenya School of Government with the First Lady as the chief guest, and I'm really hoping that, because for those of us in the gender campaign, we've been asking the police to take the action in terms of prosecution, in terms of convictions, and protection of evidence has been one big weakness around getting convictions for sexual gender-based violence crimes. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, semen has to be taken from you, so it's not an easy thing. We are happy that the police are doing it. The launch is tomorrow, and these centers, the first one is here in Nairobi. There's another one happening in Laikipia. I think a couple of other counties are preparing, and even 47 counties will eventually. The president has already promised that before the end of his term, the 47 counties will have the polycare centers. The AG will be there, all of the police departments. The police in the polycare have been trained to specially address the matters of sexual and gender-based violence. So this
has been worked on between the police and the commission?
The police and the commission and the National Gender and Equality Commission. So it's a big day for us, and it's a big day for safety of our society, because, like, you know, we're just looking at the women who are running for governance. Part of the reason why many women will not be able to come onto these spaces is because of gender-based violence. So we have to remove gender-based violence from our society. To back here, but to deal na bottoms up, na bottoms down, not gender-based violence.
Honorable Priestley, it's actually bottom-up economic approach. But anyway, I guess it's your pronunciation. But let's take a look at the feedback. Oh, your understanding, you say. Kenny, politicians are a funny lot. How dare they claim that my vote is my voice, but our parliament has been watching and crying with us as the government has been consistently making our lives harder every day. They represent the executive, but not us. Okay. Engineer Lazaro, vote registration should be a continuous program throughout the year. Registration mobilization shouldn't be left to the politicians. Some of them have done totally nothing that can give them power to appeal to Wananchi. Atanas Mavuti, Kenyans should come out to register as voters, because if you don't vote, you lose the right to complain, and bad leaders are elected by good citizens who don't vote. I think that's a good way to put it. Okelo Mwalimu, the confusion being witnessed in One Kenya Alliance is beyond this world. Each of the principals and their lieutenants insist it must be them or no one else. It will soon crumble like a house of cards. Okay. Samson Ayera, majority of parents are in dilemma. They cannot raise school fees for their children. Of course, that's your take on the show, and you continue to look at them. Thank you so much, Honorable Rosabuyu from Kisumu, and Honorable Priscilla Nyokabi, Commissioner at the National Gender and Equality Commission, as well as Herman Manyora, political analyst, but also a lecturer at the University of Nairobi. Thank you all for making time for us. And up next is Matter Social, so stay tuned to Daybreak. See you some other time. My name is Sam Gituku.